Hello, let's talk about the life and adventures of Michael Armstrong, Factory Boy, an 1840 work by Frances Milton Trollope, a industrial novel, a social problem or protest novel, all about the horrible conditions for child laborers in the factories of industrial revolution England. They Children were worked for gigantically long hours under what seemed like fairly dangerous, almost lethal conditions, had extremely short lifespans. And Trollope turned her pen towards this. This is her, I think, 10th major work. She had a long career. She is the mother of Anthony Trollope, the probably much more famous Victorian novelist. Her husband was a business failure and just wasn't able to function, and it fell upon her to supply the family with income, which she took up the pen and thus did so, and was very productive in the thing. So the life and adventures of Michael Armstrong is about Sir Matthew Dowling, a wealthy industrialist who, through some flirtations with a local noblewoman, ends up taking a factory boy, Michael Armstrong, into his loving care. He is a factory worker who exploits children, sees them as vermin. He refers to them as vermin as we go along in the story, and basically treats Michael like vermin. He tires of him. It realizes that he is not being appropriately worshipful towards him, and spirits him off to a really terrible factory, even worse than his own factories, the Deep Valley Mills, which are hidden in the countryside away from prying eyes of even the most feeble attempts of trying to regulate this industry and the horrible treatment of children. Into the story comes the other main character, which is Miss Mary Brotherton, who is the widowed wife of another industrialist. But she herself, probably as a female, has been kept away from all the horrors and is unaware of exactly just how terrible these factories are. And indeed, there's a strong implication within these works. It's almost like how how actually a lot of our factories have been moved offshore. You don't hear about horrible conditions for Apple iPhones, the workers making iPhones in China. You don't hear about the horrible conditions for animals in slaughterhouses in North America. That seems to be very much the same case of, we're going to keep this all very quiet so someone like Miss Brotherton doesn't know about this. And part of this novel, a good hunk of this novel, is her awakening as a audience surrogate, because this is very much a novel that is aimed at the British middle class to try and gear them up for some sort of a political action against these conditions. Miss Brotherton undertakes to actually try and find Michael. She takes his brother Edward into her care, and indeed things don't go well for their mother, who is very infirm at the start of this novel. So she becomes the primary caregiver and basically the mother to Edward, as she is searching for Michael. We go through many stuff, and by the end, yes, they reunite, and Miss Brotherton has had a full political awakening. One of the definite messages of the novel is that individual charity, like, oh, I'm going to help this one little individual, that might make you feel better, but that is no substitution for doing something like the genuine political agitation and legislative mass movement of something like the abolishment of slavery, which Trollope had rather ham-fistedly, or rather bluntly, equates slavery and actually kind of holds child labor of English white children maybe as a worse thing than the transatlantic slave trade. At which point, I think anyone who's got slight bits of knowledge of the thing was like, that's where you really take a step too far. But it's really trying to rev you up into that kind of a political action. So, that is probably both the strengths of the novel and the weaknesses of the novel. Is, she is a good propagandist for her side, of saying these are what the conditions are like. What can we do? Why hasn't something been done before? Showing that the moneyed interests of the industrialists are indeed the ones that can fund the politicians, and that it's very much against their thing. And you're saying, like, look, we'll only make the children work 10 hours a day, and that would be, they will actually, live longer and be more productive. Why could they not take that as such a, there's something like, that's such a moderate and reasonable thing. Why wouldn't they take that? And it's listed all the nefarious reasons why that isn't to the factory owners, to the factory owners' benefit. So that very, very much comes. Now, this is very much a middle class person of Frances Trollope looking at this issue. Indeed, the introduction of the volume, which I have in the Dolphy Classics collected works, has Trollope very specifically citing the horrible violence by misguided individuals that has happened recently. This book was, yes, published in 1840, and we have stuff like the where is it? That we have this is where we get the Chartism movement, a movement for political reform from 1838 to 1857, a national protest movement, goal for manhood suffrage, also hours and working conditions. And there were mass meetings, which indeed within this book we see Michael Armstrong going to one of these peaceful mass meetings where it's talking about workers' rights and male suffrage. But also within this period in 1839, there was a Newport Rising where leaders tried to, seize the town and trigger a national uprising, and this was brutally put down. Apparently, the government troops really outnumbered, and many people were killed. The main leaders were transported. John Frost ended up in Van Diemen's Land, modern Tasmania, because of these actions. And Trollope says, I disavow all of this. I had been planning to take Michael to from his childhood up to manhood, and then manhood to more agitating for rights. But because of all the horrible violence and stuff like that, which I disavow, we should only be doing this peacefully and respectfully, and probably should only be led by cooler, more betters, middle class kind of change. That's where the change should come. It should not come from the workers themselves. And this is where we're not talking about cute, cuddly, gorgeous children. We're talking about swarthy, dirty, angry poor men. It's like, that's not where we want to have the change from. So you do get that sense of, this is a paternalistic, maternalistic novel of, I'm looking at the problem from up here, and we will help you, but by no means should you be helping yourselves. And if you are, you should be doing it politely, deferentially, and all that. Not very. Frances Trollope is very much, looks at child labor and was motivated enough to write this novel, but is coming at it from a very conservative, probably traditional English conservative point of view of, this is something that should be calmly, gradually, gently done without minimum social disruption, which indeed is a lot of times is the English, British, Canadian way, not those dreadful Americans having a revolution or anything like that. So yeah, there is that context. So there's the positives of her advocating for change, but she very much has her limits. The other fun thing about this book is that it is so melodramatic, which you could look at and say, oh, that's a negative, it's cheesy, but it's also something that, like, if you're going to have all this social protest, social change and stuff like that, you need fun stuff. There are romances. There's, oh my God, is Michael Armstrong dead halfway through the novel? Oh my goodness. And we, spoiler, he it's the life and adventures of Michael Armstrong. He doesn't die halfway through the novel. So there's that. Trollope is good at having kind of drama and excess in her book to spice it up. Someone like you look at someone like Charles Dickens, and why does Charles Dickens survive? It's because he puts in the crowd pleasing, fun stuff like that. Now, she is not a writer. So some of her writing definitely sings. Other of it seemed very kind of choppy and kind of wordy to me in a way. And the pacing of this book, at least for a modern reader, is on the slow side. I read this out loud. I would give my my audio narration probably a 1 out of 5. I didn't know how to say some words. I was halting in other places. Definitely 1 out of 5 for the audio narration on this book. But having to kind of go through it methodically, chapter by chapter, you kind of feel the lulls that happen in the book. But that said, there's enough kind of odd stuff going on, or just interest and fun set pieces of Sir Matthew's final kind of madness is an entertaining way to tell this story of a social problem, industrial novel. So yeah. Now the other thing I want to talk about is the ending. So spoilers for a book written in 1840 if you're planning to get around to it, but how can I say? I would say that the ending of the book was a big kind of what the hell to me, big what the fuck moment, which in some ways answers to what happened within going through the book. Michael Armstrong, Edward, factory girl that Michael meets at Sir Matthew Dowling, at Deep Valley Mill, are super idealized. They are angelic. They are so good, and they're super good looking. These are factory fashion plate model factory children. There is that thing. As I was reading, and I was thinking, oh, the propagandist, Frances Trollope, is just trying to make the most idealized, wonderful versions of the children that she wants to save. You don't want to have some dirty, illiterate, unpleasant child that you're trying to save. You want to hold up the golden, wonderful, adorable, loving child. So I thought that was the thing. But as we get to the end and they grow up, they become super good looking. And by the end of this novel, there's, the kind of the romantic pairings up that you're going to expect. But then there's a romantic pairing that you're like, oh, really? And that's probably where the spoiler comes in. It gets put off. It gets played coyly, like it's almost like a joke, like it's a naughty little thing, which is that Miss Mary Brotherton, who has taken Edward as her ward, as basically a mother-son relationship. At the end of the novel, it is broadly hinted, kind of titteringly, that, oh yes, and another marriage happened. Yes, Mary Brotherton marries Edward. Edward, who is now, he's now an adult, but it's got that kind of squicky, oh my God, so this person that you had a relationship of, like, basically mother-son, is now going to be a husband and wife, and somebody who loves the children raises one of them and marries them because he's so hot, which is like gross. And apparently even at the time, this was shocking, except it wasn't shocking for the reasons that we would put it now. It was because it crossed the class divide. Miss Mary Brotherton was of a higher class than Edward Armstrong, who is, factory boy, factory level. So that was the scandal of the time. It was a class crossing versus oh, you married your mother, dude. It's like gross. So, and it's odd that in a novel that is all about the exploitation of children, at the very end of the novel, you have someone who was taking a moral stand, having learned the conditions of what was happening with the exploitation of these children, at the end is sort of in an exploitive relationship with one of the very children that she actually saves, which is odd. is kind of gross. I can very much, it's always one of these things of, if it had been a guy trying to save the children and then saved a girl, had saved Fanny and raised her up and then married her, we would be like, oh, holy crap, what the hell's going on? And I do get the sort of the same feel with this. That said, it was a really fascinating work to get an idea of what people thought of the factory conditions at the time, and an early example of social protest novel. I think it's funny. I think I wouldn't really have much time for a novel like this written in now. I would just say, oh, I just want to read I would want to read a nonfiction work about conditions in factories in other parts of the world, or even factories here, or the mistreatment of we have migrant workers and all the exploitations that happen here. But I have to say, there's something about putting it in a story and putting all this melodrama in it. It's the spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down. It definitely shows its limitations too. It's interesting to see something where it's like, oh, very much someone of this class has decided to comment on something that's happening to people of this class, and they have their very strong opinions of exactly how far it should go, or what the reform should be, and the limitations that way. So yeah. I'm glad I spent this time with Frances Trollope. I think the next time I will probably just read it so I can get through it a bit quicker, because reading it on audio, reading it to myself, not reading it on audio, reading it out loud to myself did take a significant amount of time, as this review is taken. All right, I will leave it there. More videos later.